The good news is, if there's good news, when it comes to substance exposure, drug exposure is more prevalent than alcohol exposure, and alcohol exposure is usually worse than drug exposure. So that's the silver lining here. But it impacts children exposed to alcohol prenatally. So you want to know what that looks like and what long-term effects that can be. Welcome to the Adoption Roadmap Podcast, your go-to guide through the beautiful, complex, and transformative journey of adoption. I'm Rebecca Gruenspan, a single mom through adoption consultant for over a decade, author of the Adoption Roadmap book, and your trusted guide. In each episode, we dive into real experiences, expert insights, and the raw, honest truths that you will need to navigate your journey. Whether you're just beginning, in the thick of it, or well past placement, you'll find support and community here to help you navigate this unique path with confidence and love. Adoption isn't all rainbows and butterflies. It is life-changing and worth every bit of effort. Let's learn, grow, and journey together on the Adoption Roadmap Podcast. Hello, and welcome to This Week in Adoption. FYI, This Week in Adoption is happening ASAP. And trust me, you don't want to DIY this one. If you're drowning in adoption acronyms like ICPC, Quad A, NASD, and ICWA, don't worry, I've got you covered. Let's break it down together. Welcome to This Week in Adoption. So during your adoption journey, there's so much alphabet soup. So let's start with ICPC. ICPC stands for Interstate Compact on the Placement of Children. It is the legal agreement between two states to safely place children across state lines. So it ensures that adoption laws are being honored and followed in both states. It takes a little bit of time. Sometimes it takes 7 to 14 days, I'd say on average, is what we tell people. I always tell people, plan on 3 weeks, hope it's 1. There's nothing you can do while it's being done. Basically, it's just a bunch of paperwork going back and forth between states. Once it's done and you've been cleared by the state you adopted in and the state you are going home to, you'll get an email or a text or a phone call saying, okay, you can go home now. It's as simple as that. But you can't do anything to speed it up. I think there's like one person in every state who takes care of ICPC. And literally it depends on how many are on her desk when yours comes through and whether it's over a holiday as well. That can lengthen the time. The next acronym, Quad A. AAAA stands for American Academy of Adoption Attorneys. It's the professional association of lawyers specializing in adoption law. And you have to apply. You have to have completed a certain number of, I think, ICPC adoption cases, but it might just be overall adoption cases. So if you find an attorney that is a member of Quad A, then they are experts in adoption. They have to follow certain ethics and have specialized training in adoption. Now, that does not mean that if they are not a member of Quad A, that they're not a good adoption attorney or they don't know what they're doing. But if you're starting from scratch and you don't know who to turn to and you don't know, you don't have any references, going to the American Academy of Adoption Attorneys online and searching by your state is a pretty good place to start. ICWA, ICWA, stands for Indian Child Welfare Act. It is a federal law protecting Native American children's cultural heritage and families. Cultural heritage and families, Native American families. It requires special compliance when adopting a child of Native American heritage. So, and I am starting to see that there are different rules in different states and different tribes. So if you see the word Native American come up in any adoption situation that you are considering, ask questions. Ask what it means. Ask how long it's going to take. Ask what needs to happen legally before you become the parent. Okay. Here are some additional acronyms that you might come across. FASD, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. And some of these are acronyms you might see while you're considering an adoption situation, or if you're on Facebook looking into different groups. FASD, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. You definitely want to do research to know what that looks like. The good news is, if there's good news, when it comes to substance exposure, drug exposure is more prevalent than alcohol exposure, and alcohol exposure is usually worse than drug exposure. So that's the silver lining here. But it impacts children exposed to alcohol prenatally. So you want to know what that looks like and what long-term effects that can be. RAD, R-A-D, is reactive attachment disorder, which occurs due to early trauma, and it may affect trust and attachment. I am not an expert. I believe it is more common with children that are coming through foster care and have had more lived trauma, but don't quote me on that. SPD, sensory processing disorder. This was a new one to me, where a child has challenges processing sensory input. NAS or NASD is neonatal abstinence syndrome. Disorder is the D. It occurs when a newborn is born with exposure in their system and experiences withdrawal symptoms from exposure to substances or medications that the birth mom used during pregnancy. It's very common with opioid use, certain prescription medications, or other illicit substances. And symptoms for NASD or NAS can include irritability, sleep disturbances, tremors, feeding difficulties, being very rigid and stiff, and high-pitched crying. And I think it can last from 3 to 5 days or for weeks. And sometimes there's a delayed reaction. Again, I'm not an expert, but I'm pretty sure I'm correct. Now, if your children have any of these that we just talked about, NASD, FASD, sensory issues, processing issues, you want to look into early intervention or therapeutic support through your state. These services are in place to help your babies thrive. So if you know that your baby has any of these disorders, has been exposed, had any sort of trauma at birth, you definitely want to look into early childhood intervention within your state. Now, these children that I just mentioned will more than likely be in the NICU for some time, which stands for Neonatal Intensive Care Unit. It's a specialized hospital unit providing intensive medical care for newborns who are premature, experiencing medical complications, or exposed to substances in utero. So if there's a problem, they are going into the NICU. Maybe they're having respiratory issues, feeding complications. They've been exposed to substances, or they have some sort of condition identified at birth. Now, in the NICU, and by the way, I think some hospitals or some states have special places or clinics for, instead of a baby who's been exposed being in the NICU, sometimes they have special clinics for this. This is where they will teach you how to bond and do some skin to skin. Definitely you'll have a lot of access to NICU nurses, and you'll learn about bonding techniques and feeding support. And they are very emotionally intense as well. So seek out that emotional as well as practical support if you are in the NICU. And I'll also make a plug for the Ronald McDonald House. If you're going to be in the NICU for a long time and you know that, try to get into a hospital that has a Ronald McDonald House associated with it or nearby, or ask where the closest one is, because that would be a beautiful place for you to stay if you know your baby's going to be in the hospital for a long time. Now, once you adopt your child, here are a couple other acronyms that adoptive parents might come across. One that's very common is ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. It's usually not identified until your child's a little bit later in their elementary school years, but different age ranges for sure. And this is a disorder, a neurodevelopmental condition affecting focus, impulse control, and hyperactivity. Definitely therapies and routines and structures for a child who is struggling with ADHD is very helpful. Along with ADHD or any number of other issues that our kiddos may have, you might be looking into an IEP. An IEP stands for Individualized Education Program. They are impossible to navigate unless there is a really severe issue. But if it's something like ADHD, where you know your child is struggling and the school is like, yeah, but that's not really a disability, and you know it is, it can be so complicated and infuriating, and you might want to rip out your hair. I have been there. An IEP is a legally binding document outlining special education services provided to a child in school. And it's tailored specifically to your child's unique educational needs and learning style. You will, I'm not going to get too into that because I'm certainly no expert, but an IEP is something that you might need to be familiar with, as well as maybe a 504 plan, which is a step underneath that also provides accommodations for kids with disabilities who don't need specialized instruction, but still require additional support, like extended test time or modified homework or breaks during the day. These are all things that are extremely common with our kids. And another really common acronym is OT, which stands for occupational therapy, which took me a long time to even figure out what exactly it was, but it's therapeutic intervention helping children develop daily life and motor skills. It often supports sensory processing, and a lot of our kids have sensory processing or executive functioning issues. It helps with coordination and handwriting and self-regulation. These are all things that if you are going to need them later in your child's life, you want to have that track of services that you've gotten through early intervention. So I recommend it to everyone. That's enough for alphabet soup. I hope that was helpful. And if these are things that you worry about, or if you're an adoptive parent who is starting to see more and more of these things popping up and you're like confused and don't know how to deal with it, and you know what? You might want to consider joining us inside of the Adoption Continuum. It is our online community for adoptive parents. And when you're listening to this, the doors may be open. If not, you can get on a wait list. We will have both of those links in the show notes, and we will be opening it, having our first founders launch early in June 2025, and then closing our doors, and not sure when it's going to be open again, but a number of times throughout the year, we will continue opening where we will have experts inside to be able to help you navigate these things. And we will have resources for you to know where to go. And at the very least, other parents who have navigated it before you. So consider joining us inside of the Adoption Continuum. Thank you so much for listening today, and until next week, bye-bye. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Adoption Roadmap podcast. If you did, I have a few favors to ask of you. First, please hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. And while you're at it, I'd love to hear your takeaways. Please write a review and let me know what you liked. And if you have a question or a suggestion on what you'd like to hear, I'd love to hear that too. Please shoot me an email at support@rgadoptionconsulting.com and let me know what you'd like to hear about. And if you have a question, I may just answer it online. Thanks again for listening. Tune in every Wednesday and Friday morning for a brand new episode of the Adoption Roadmap podcast. Until next time, bye-bye.